Welcome back to the War Room. Svihlik and Shooter here, joined today for a mega episode. We got Dr. Seif, David Seifert, D1 Baseball, Prep Baseball, College Draft Extraordinaire. You all know what that means. We're talking full-on draft. It's 2 weeks where we stand right now, about 2 weeks from actual draft day. We're in draft month. It's taken forever. It's pushed back forever, but it's finally here. So we will have our final draft board coming out. We're going to talk almost exclusively college stuff today. A lot of talent at the top. But first of all, DJ, Dr. Seif, welcome back.
Thanks, Shooter. Good to be back.
I want to hit you guys right off the top because we're going to dive in this draft board. There's a lot of famous names at the top in 2024 from the college side. You can screen in the background and be scrolling the entire episode with all the stuff that I've got going on over here. Let me hit you with 2023 draft, which is already shaping up to be pretty impressive. Paul Skeens at the top, already a big leaguer. Talking about, I don't know what the all-star voting is right now, but I think he may have a chance with that. You throw in Livy Dunn, a couple of votes there. Dylan Cruz, second pick, he's hitting 277, 7 home runs, 14 doubles, 18 bags across AA, AAA. He's knocking on the door. Right now, James Wood getting called up for the Nationals. Dylan Cruz likely on the way. If not this year, definitely next year. Wyatt Langford obviously broke with the Rangers, world champion Rangers. Impressive, hit first cycle the other night. Nolan Shanuel called up last year, the first guy from the class. And then you go into guys like, check out these stats, Seif. Jacob Wilson's hitting 463 this year. He's got nearly a 500 OBP. And this isn't on-campus AZL stuff. It's almost majority AA, AAA at-bats. So it's just outstanding. I passed it the other night. Kyle Teel, Red Sox pick, hitting 303 right now in AA with 14 doubles. So just an outstanding, especially positional player side. What I want to ask you guys now, and DJ, you can speak to it from your side as a former scouting director. How much pressure does that put on the 2024 class? Just the fact that those 23 guys have performed so well. They hit the ground running. They are outstanding. This 2024 group, is there pressure on them that they do not know yet?
No, I don't. Shooter, I don't think there's pressure on them. I'd like to hear. We talked about this the last time. What I don't like hearing is when people write stuff that the class is not good. I don't like that. I don't agree with that. I don't like that. There could be certain pockets of the draft that aren't great, but all of those names that you just read off, let's just call them what they were. Those were very, very good college players.
Yes.
From Jacob Wilson to Paul Skeens, of course, and anywhere you take these guys. But when you look at this year's class, and Seif can speak to this, I'm pretty excited. I haven't gone out and seen a lot of players, but I'm pretty excited when I see the names on paper and I see what these players have done throughout their college career. There are a lot of great options for these teams to take from pick number 1 all the way through pick number 30. Is it hard? Is it difficult? Is it tough to separate them sometimes? Sure. Just like it might have been difficult to separate Dylan Cruz and Wyatt Langford. But make no mistake, these players, there's some really, really talented offensive players in this year's first round on the college side.
Seif, what about you? This 24 group, we're looking back at 23, just how star-studded it is right now. I mean, honestly, these guys are almost household names. Paul Skeens is a household name at this point. This 24 group, what are we feeling with these guys?
Well, I think last year we had the big three, right? We had Skeens, we had Langford, and we had Cruz. Like they were the three unanimous. And this year there's kind of like 4 guys at the top, and I'm bringing up their name in the same sentence with Chase Burns and Paul Skeens, but they're very similar guys, right? They both throw 100. They both have a really good breaking ball. They both throw strikes. And I'm not saying Burns is going to be Skeens hitting the ground running like Skeens has in the big leagues, but Burns could be the ace of a staff. So you still have that high-end right-handed pitcher just like you did last year. You got a bunch of good bats that could become Langford or Cruz, and Charlie Condon. I love Cags, as we all know already. Weatherhold, if he can just stay healthy continuously, he's going to be a dude. And Bazana, who's hit his entire career. So we've got 4 guys that could be real similar bat-wise than Cruz and Langford. That's even before we got to Jacob Wilson, even before you got to the, some of the other guys that were selected.
So let's talk about the actual list. Jack Caglianone's a guy who's been number 1 on our college board almost throughout. Since last summer, it's kind of going the full way. Other people have kind of shifted back and forth, whether it's Weatherhold, Kurtz, Bazana, Condon coming into the mix throughout this year with such an outstanding season. Why Cags at 1?
For me, we put him there over a year ago, and he stayed there, and that's no reason to keep him there. But my big thing is, like, he's done nothing to lose his throne. Like, the guy hit 35 more home runs. He was intentionally walked a ton. He was the only hitter in the lineup. He also pitched every once every week. So he's got that two-way, and I think as soon as he puts away the two-way, at least on a temporary basis, because you never know when he can bust it back out, I think he's going to take off further. But the guy improved. He was critical. He was criticized or whatever. They want improvement in his chase rate. He lowered his chase rate. He more than doubled his walk rate. He cut his strikeout rate by 2/3. It went from like 15.5 to 5.6. He raised his ISO. I mean, I realize ISO in college baseball went up 6%. And strikeout rate went down 2% as a whole of all of college baseball from the 23 season to 24 season. But Cags did everything. I also realized Condon had a crazy good year. Whatever you order, you put those 4 in, Cags, Bazzano, Weatherholt, and Condon, go for it. They're all super good players. I'm just sticking with Cags, even though I know the history of college first baseman in professional baseball. I just believe that Cags will be the exception. I believe Cags will be a 10-year All-Star, and we'll be talking about him relatively soon in his professional career. I don't think he's going to be in the minor leagues too long at all.
So it sounds like that group of 4 is really good. DJ, let me shift it over to you from the scouting director aspect, okay? So you have a group of 4 guys, really talented. Sounds like they're pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
You're the guards. You're on the clock at 1. You have a massive money, a slew of money. I think they have the number 1, 18 million plus. What can you do leading up to the draft, knowing like, hey, we've evaluated this. We like any of these 4. Do you start pitting them against each other? Do you talk to agents? Hey, can we get $200K here? What would be enough money for you to go to number 4 on your board? What would be enough money to save to go to number 5 on your board?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Shooter. I think that has to do with what you think about the draft later on and where your picks are, what the market looks like further down the board. I would try to keep my eye on the ball, though, if you were up there picking around Colorado and where Cleveland's picking, and just take the player that, because you're going to be able to sign the guy.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that you're taking the player that fits what you're looking for. And when you're that high in the draft, let me be very clear, there's very few players that are going to fit a profile perfect in any draft. There's just not. I've heard for years talking about profiles in the 3rd round and the 2nd round, and like that's just really, really hard. These players are, these players are true profile players. So if you're Cleveland, I would think your decision would be based a little bit more on need, what they think is going to maybe get to the big leagues faster. These are things you can't really consider down the board. But when you're this high on the board and the players are that talented, you can think about need and you can think about fit and what's the best situation for your organization. You just make your decision based upon that. So if you're not looking for a corner bat and you want something in the middle of the field, then maybe you dive into the Bassana mix. Or maybe you surprise somebody and you take somebody like Weatherholt, where you can probably save some money. But I think the decision's probably more that than it is the money at that point.
Yeah, and I think Seifert would talk like at the top, you want to get your guy, and I think they have more than enough money. We can split later. We'll talk on some separate episodes on some game plans. I do think that the guards can probably get 2 of these excellent righty or lefty prep arms later in the draft because they have that much money. But Seif, going back, we switched. So at the top on the list, Jack Caglione at number 1, Travis Bazzana, Oregon State, 2nd baseman at 2, JJ Weatherholt, shortstop from West Virginia at 3, Charlie Condon, the great first base, or I guess he's kind of a utility. He played 3rd base, outfield, kind of did it all for Georgia in that great season. At 5 and 6, you switch over to the arms. So we switch over Chase Burns at 5, Hagen Smith at 6. Is there a sense that they are definitely clear 1-2 in the college ranks? They are going to kind of dictate the arm market for the college side. Does Yasevich get pushed into the mix? How much is that difference between those guys?
I think there's a large difference for me between Burns, Smith, right next to each other, and then down a few more spots to Yasevich. They're all 3 really, really good. Smith and Burns can just absolutely just take over the game. And Yasevich has 3+ pitches. He's really good too. I just think at the end of the day, he's more of a 3rd man, mid-rotation, a good 4. Whereas Smith and, I mean, this is a stretch, but Smith could be Clayton Kershaw for a few years. I mean, the breaking ball is that good. The fastball is up to 99, 100. Guy's a bulldog, super competitive. And Chase Burns, just the sky's the limit for that guy. So I think you're talking potential aces there. I just never see a Savage being an ace of a rotation. And so that's why there's a few hitters in between Burns, Smith, and Savage.
So those top six, right? So we have those arms we put together. At this point, we've been looking at these guys for well over a year. It's ad nauseum to us to like talk about Jack Caglione. It's kind of out there. It feels like the draft shifts after those guys. Now we get into the fun part. And DJ, you were kind of in this mix last year at 9 when you guys took Noble Meyer, who is off to a great start there in high A for the Marlins. It gets fun here because things can start going haywire in a hurry. They're shifting. And DJ, we've had so many talks about going in with a plan. What is our plan? What do we want to accomplish? It feels like those first 6 picks, they'll be on the clock. We'll be doing the TV stuff. From the fans' perspective, it will take forever because it's going to be one of those guys all the way. And then all of a sudden, picks 7, 8, 9 come. And now we can really have some fun. So, Seif, DJ, those guys, we're talking Nick Kurtz, who maybe Seif, talk a little bit about Nick Kurtz, Ray Montgomery, Walter Gonick, and even throw in James Tibbs into that mix. Just kind of those hitters, those 4 guys. Talk about their strengths and what could push them up, what could push them down, what's separating them right now.
Man, Kurtz, I mean, like, I hate to say I go both ways on Kurtz. The obviously the success of Wake Forest hitters in pro ball hasn't been maybe to where they've been picked. They've been picked pretty high and haven't performed at that level. And then I would say, well, Kurtz is going to be different. Like, there's super bat speed there. I mean, it's 70, 80 grade bat speed. It's 80 grade power. He's a premium defender and a really good athlete, better athlete than all those corner guys from Wake in the past. So I really, really like Kurtz, but again, he is just a first baseman. And so that's why we have the Burns and Smith ahead of him. But from there, you got Braden Montgomery, obviously 5'2" guy, broke his ankle in the Super Regional. So obviously wasn't a part of the College World Series for the Aggies. But he does it all from both sides of the plate. Showed a ton of improvement from the right side over years past, but also slid a little bit performance-wise the last 5-6 weeks of the season, but super big fan. I mean, anybody who can make those adjustments from, the end of one season to the beginning of the next, I mean, and there's just room for more. It means he's obviously, we know he's athletic. It means he has aptitude. It means he works hard. It means a lot of different things. I'm a huge fan of Montgomery. After him, Walter Yannick from Sam Houston State. Talked about him before in cast past, but he really impressed me last year at the WAC tournament when they were in the WAC, obviously. Just really liked him. Went over his sophomore season, saw him catch a few at-bats one game. Followed up with him in the Cape, liked him again in the Cape. So I was kind of on him from the start before he went back for his junior year. And he put together just an outstanding junior year behind the plate. He was already a plus defender, could receive, he blocks, he throws. It's accurate. He's athletic. And then obviously he put together an even better offensive year. So he's, for me, now the top catcher in the draft. Those guys typically go, in the top half of the first round, whoever that is, whatever year it is. So really like Yannick a lot. And then, those are the 3 hitters we have between the two pitchers and then Savage. And then a little right behind Savage, we got James Tibbs, Mr. Bat, Florida State, hit all year. He's hit his whole life. He has power. He's an improving defender in right field. He's still below average, but at least he's better than he was. So, again, it just shows he works hard, shows he has aptitude, shows you there's more ceiling there defensively. There's never been any question about his bat. And then you got the high upside of Carson Benj from Oklahoma State. He's a near first-round pitcher just with the stuff he has. But I don't think he's performed yet to the level of a first-round draft pick that you'd typically like to see perform as a hitter, but he has performed well enough. He is very athletic. He has other tools that go with his game. He has instincts. He's a baseball player. He has all those intangibles. So, again, there's upside there for him. So his upside puts him into the first round, and for me, right behind more of the sure thing tips. So,
let me ask you. Let me put you again on the hot seat here. Which of those 4 guys, when we look back in 5 years, are you going to be saying, how did this guy get to us? Choose one.
Of all the guys I just spoke about?
Yeah. How in the world did this guy slip to 9? How did?
I'm gonna go with Walker Yannick. Like I said, I wish I were an area scout where I knew him even better. I could, I could seen him play 10 times in the spring. Again, I have history with him over 2 years, but it's a look here, it's a look there, it's a look there. But I can also read the stats, right? They tell you what you don't see when you're not there. So, man, I know he has medical conditions similar to Garrett Mitchell, and I know Garrett Mitchell's career has been kind of up and down. There's also been other guys before him with the same condition. So that's obviously working against him. But, man, I love the kid. He's super competitive. He's a great baseball player, great defender. He has a chance to hit. And if you're that guy, you have a chance to play every day for a long time if you can hit, catch, and throw, and you're obviously a catcher. So
is he Will Smith upside? Is he a Will Smith guy?
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison right there. I really, really do. Good call.
Shooter, number one, people that write that the draft isn't good and then listen to this conversation, what are they talking about? There are some really good players there. You hear the excitement in Seif's voice when he's talking about Yannick and Benj and Tibbs, and the list is going to continue on. Just because we don't have the same type of high school class that we might have had last year or we have in 2021 doesn't mean that there's some really good players there. And to the point on Yannick, Seif, you and I have talked about this. I'm going to be very clear. I am not a big proponent of college catchers in the top half of the first round for a lot of reasons. This one's different. Most of the time you're dealing with players like Parada, where you're like, yeah, I think he can hit, but can he actually catch? Very rarely do you get a chance to take a guy like Bailey or Will Smith that can do both. In the situation here, I hear you talk about Walker Yannick. I'm like, why would you not take this guy? Makeup, athlete, compete, and he does both. He can really catch and he can really hit. So that would be an exciting pick for me if I was picking in the middle of the first round or in the top half of the first round. And I'm not a big proponent of catchers up there.
Yeah, what really sealed it for me with Yannick was I saw him pitch against Ryan Johnson from Dallas Baptist, who will be a day one arm. Johnson's up to 97, 98 plus slider, deceptive as can be. Yannick went toe for toe with that guy for 4 at-bats. He had a 21-game hitting streak coming in, and his last at-bat come up, there was some pressure. It was like a 3-1 game. Yannick got a line drive single to right center, kept the line moving. Before that, he walked. It was like a 9-pitch walk where he fouled off 3 or 4 sliders, spit on an inside fastball. Johnson was at his best. Johnson ended with like a 3-hit. I think it was a final 3-2 game, 3-hit, like 14 strikeout performance. So Johnson was on his A game, but Yannick's A game was better than Johnson's A game. So just that one game, again, I just get these brief looks, right? Like I'm not an area scout anymore. Love my days in area scout, but I'm not in that role anymore. But toe for toe, Yannick was outstanding that day against a top arm. And that's just what sold me when I knew the guy could battle in the box.
One of shooter Seif, one of the most difficult things you have to deal with in the draft room are medical situations. And it's very, very difficult to handicap whether you're dealing with a pitcher that has some elbow or shoulder issues or you have other type of medical conditions, because when you start to pull that player down the board, the condition exists, whether it's the first round or the second round or the third round. So it's very hard to handicap how you do that. So most teams, I would suspect, are either it's going to be a black and a white here. It's going to be a yes and a no. And if it's a yes, then you don't handicap the medical condition. Then you just take the player. If it's a no, it's a no. This isn't like is he going to blow his arm out, or is he going to hurt his shoulder or something like that? So I would suspect that there will be some teams that might just say no, but the teams that say yes probably get really excited about Yannick.
How stringent is that medical? This is going to go on a tangent a little bit, but like, is each team different? What are they saying where you cannot take this guy? Because I've heard it with, you should see the medical on this arm. Well, guess what? Everybody's going to blow out their TJ. Like it's going to happen if they're that good. That's how I look at it. So what's it like for the team?
Excuse me, sorry. So, some teams are very, very strict with the medical. With the Marlins, our staff was actually great. Very, very rarely would we pull a guy off the board. And part of that was because I would try to drive this narrative that the market is small, the player lists are small, the talent groups are small, and you don't want to start eliminating players. So unless it was an extreme situation, we weren't ripping guys off the board. Very, very, I can think in 5 years, probably 3 or 4 players, maybe 5 in 5 years. I've been in other situations where it's been a lot more conservative and you start moving players. Sometimes I wonder if directors do that just because they're not crazy about the player and the medical staff gives them the excuse to move the player out of the way. But I think for the most part, teams aren't terribly stringent. We weren't very stringent on that.
Okay. So we talked about Tibbs, Benji there. Awesome guys. Let me throw a couple more familiar names. So these are first round vibes, big time athletes. Christian Moore, huge standout from national champion Tennessee Vols. Seifert King, Wake Forest, and then Cam Smith, Florida State, who's a draft eligible sop. So those three kind of have, I would say, kind of similar profiles where they're not impact defenders, but the bats really do play, and there is upside in the box, which is DJ, you'll continue to say, that's where that war is going to come from. So Seif, separate those three and talk a little bit about their talent.
Christian Moore, of the three, Moore's the best hitter, the most proven hitter. I mean, what the second best or first best in the SEC only games with Condon. So the thing that I'm not sure about Moore is like he does play second base, and I don't want to go negative here, but like at the World Series especially, I think he fielded his foot as much as he did the baseball. He just looked awkward there. You know, he is not a fluid. He is not a natural defender. So, you know, he can run, you put him in center field, but I've never seen it. So there's a little doubt there, but his defense, he's a below average defender. I'm just not sure where you put him, but it's all about the bat for the most part. And man, he has a special bat. I mean, there's power to all fields. There's bat to ball. He hits a multitude of pitches. It's just not like he's a dead red hitter. So great bat. Cam Smith is the next, track record performance-wise, at least this year, is the next bat. There's power in there. There's 70 raw power, maybe 80 raw power. Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't like how he does it. I think he has to make somewhat of a major change. Instead of he's just a dead start hitter, he's got to get some more flow in there, help his timing, or he's going to get in a pro ball, double A, where they're just going to hum him fastballs in and just beat up his hands. And he's certainly strong enough to fight through it, but I would just like a little more fluidity and polish to a swing when it's a guy who I don't think stays at third. I think he becomes a right fielder. I am a big fan of Cam Smith, don't get me wrong, but I just think there's too much to fix with him to be the leader of that group, or to even be above like his teammate James Tibbs, or even get up to the tier we were just talking about with Montgomery Yannick, those guys. And then the last one is Seifert King. Huge fan of Seifert King. Great story. Saw him for the first time ever last year with the USA CNT. Had an outstanding summer. Continued this fall at Wake Forest. I personally thought he would post better numbers at Wake in that ballpark with that lineup than he did, but his numbers certainly weren't bad. And he's right there in the mix. I don't know if he has a true position, but there's super. If one thing Ben Zobrist taught us, there's a ton of value in being a super utility guy. And I think that's exactly what he is. But of the three, he's the least offensive, but the most defensive. So those three are all right there for us.
Let me ask you about Seifert King and like comparing it to last year, because he kind of fits into that middle of the first round, back half. Matt Shaw, Tommy Troy, does he fall into that kind of discussion with the frame size? Where's he going to play? Bat? Is he similar to them? Is he better than them? Is he worse than them?
I think the upside is higher than either of those two. Present value is less. So, me, I'm more of a conservative. I'm a balanced portfolio guy. Okay. So if I'm picking Matt Shaw in the first round, I'm going upside to my second pick, right? So if I'm picking Seifert King with my first pick this year in the first round, I'm going to balance that out a little bit by a polished, a higher present tool hitability guy. So again, the board's going to tell you who you pick. I always think you pick the best guy on your board, and that's why you got to be super diligent, go over and over it, ask all the questions, get everything straight leading up to it, and give yourself a little flexibility with 4 boards: college hitters, college pitchers, high school, prep hitters, prep pitchers. Give yourself some flexibility there. But that's my approach. So I know I didn't really answer your question directly. The board's going to tell you who to pick. King is a little bit less present guy than the two you mentioned from last year. Yeah. But they're same neighborhood guys, because the upside with King would exceed, for me, Shaw.
That's basically I was getting to, because I was a big Kyle Teal fan, as you knew from last year. He's off to a great start. Those guys are a little bit slower. starting so far, so it looks good from our sense with prep baseball.
Hey, shooter, stop pushing your jersey, guys.
I won't. We will get to the high school side too.
That's what I'm talking. You've already talked about Dickerson, and we got Message, and we're going right back to Teal.
There's something there. Seif, I do want to ask you though, because you talked about Christian Moore defensively, second baseman. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Bazana's the second baseman.
Correct.
Bazana hits. Christian Moore hits. Go into more of the difference between those guys, because DJ, then I'm going to come back to, hey, if Christian Moore were looking at 10 to 15, that's a considerable discount between Christian Moore and where we have Bazana right now. So, Seif, tell me the difference between those two players.
Bazana's going to stay at second. He could obviously go to center, but again, I've never seen him there. But for me, Bazana just stays at second base. There's no questions. I saw him in the Cape. Fields just fine. The hands work. There's range. It's 50-55 range. He's got enough arm. He doesn't have enough arm to play shortstop, whereas Moore does have enough arm to play shortstop, but he just doesn't have the instincts, the actions to handle shortstop. So, but Bazana just stays in the middle of the diamond without a doubt. He is a true second baseman. He's not like my idol Ryan Sandberg and his 8 Gold Gloves, but he's definitely good enough to do the job. He's not quite as good maybe at second base as Matt Shaw, just to bring up the name we mentioned, but he's right there. He'll be plenty fine at second base in the big leagues while he's hitting 300 in the 3-hole with 25 home runs.
Okay, well there you go. You got pressed on that. That's good stuff. Now, DJ, how much different would their bats have to be for you to start thinking about? Take everything out of it. We're only talking about the talent, what's on the field, the bat here. Hey, we're the Rockies at 2. We need to revamp. We're going to have to get some arms somehow. We don't want to get an arm this high, but we want to get like 5 of those high school arms. Can we get Christian Moore at $1 million? Is that something you're even considering?
I don't think the Rockies are creative enough to do that. I think they're just going to stay the course and do what they do well. And with the Rockies, they've been very, very good. And I say that because they're a very traditional scouting team. They have a really good amateur scouting department. They've got a long history with bats. And I think they've gotten to the point, and I can't speak for them, but they've gotten to the point where they wouldn't do something like that. They trust their ability to evaluate bats and pick the right one later down the board. So if they wanted to go Chase Burns or they wanted to go Hagen Smith based upon the fact that they need to pump some pitching into their system, they're just going to go that route. And they've shown the willingness to do that over the last couple of years. So,
and how much freedom? So, shoot, this is going to tie in a bigger theory. Like, how much freedom? How many teams have the freedom to do something like that? Whereas, hey, I got to answer to this. We got to kind of play the classics here. Charlie Condon's on the board. We need pitching. We are taking Charlie Condon. But how many teams have the freedom to go, no, we're going to take this prep arm and we're going to do this and this? How many teams can do that?
Very few. It depends on who's running the draft and who's making the calls. You got to get a lot of support. You got to create a good narrative for your general manager, for your ownership group. The players up there are all very, very, very good. And like I mentioned earlier, if there is a need, in the case of Colorado, it's a very unique situation with pitching. They might pass what they think is the better player to take the best of another group. That's just what it is. It's hard to do that. Me personally, in this year's draft, listening to Seif, digging into some of these numbers, I don't care how much I need pitching. I'd be plowing right into the Condons and the Bazanas and the Caglianos. I wouldn't be messing around with, because what we do know, and we haven't talked about this yet, there are some arms down the board that can be sneaky good, whether it's in the high school group that you referenced that we'll talk about on another show, or it's guys down the board like Prager, who's got some really interesting metrics and whatnot. And I bring up Prager. There's other ones, but there's opportunities later down the board to get into some of that stuff. So I would just stay the course, stay with the classics, as you say, and I'm pulling Condon or I'm pulling Kurtz or one of those guys.
Well, let's shift over to more of the back half of the first round here, Seif. So we always talk about the groupings, right? So we have those big 4 at the top right there. We have a nice little set coming underneath it. All of a sudden, you start getting to that 15 to 30 range. And it feels to me a lot of times, we like this guy. We don't love him here. He won't get to us there. So who's kind of in that group where you're going to have to put, if you really like this guy, you really got to pull the trigger now, earlier on, because he will not get to 40. whereas 18, 19, we love them more at 28, 29. Are there guys like that? I'm thinking of Jonathan Santucci, who came back, even Malcolm Moore, Lou Cinci from Mississippi State, where this guy Brody Brecht, guys who might not get to us at that next pick, but it feels potentially a little rich right now in that middle to end of the first round.
Man, for me, I mean, you mentioned a few of them already, but for me, I'm not sure he's 15 to 20. But if I'm 25-ish somewhere, I'm super impressed with Kyle DeBarge.
Okay.
And call me the mid-major fan because that's kind of my role with
Power
D1
major, you know, baby.
I was waiting for you to bring up DeBarge when you were talking about those other guys. When you were talking about Seaver King, I'm like, pass King and take DeBarge. You love that guy.
Hey man, I love the SEC. I spend most of my days in the SEC and the ACC because that's where the guys are. But when you go see the Yannicks and the DeBarges, I saw you DeBarge at the Sun Belt tournament. I mean, that guy just reminds me of Matt McClain, And Matt McClain, quick to the big leagues, produced. I know he's been out all year with a shoulder injury, but like similar size, similar tool set. DeBarge has a little bit more arm than McClain, but I know it's all about the bat. But I mean, there's power. There's bat to ball. There's instincts. There's a gamer. The dude can just play the game. So I'm a huge DeBarge fan. I just think he's going to probably go in the second round, early second, but I think he's a first round talent. And I think he'll be one of the, he'll be a first round caliber performer at the end of the day.
So you wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round. Like if somebody did it, you would just shake your head and say, those guys scouted.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the other names, and not that they're all not really good players, but I mean, he's 20th on our college board, and I'm sure that's higher than anywhere else. And I'm not trying to like compete with anywhere else. I'm just trying to rank the players as I see them. I probably saw 85% of this list in person in the spring, and nearly 100% of the list if you go back to last summer, fall, and spring. So, but again, it's only one look here or there. I'm not an area guy. I'm not nowhere as good knowing each individual players. Those guys do their job, but it is what I see, and then I can read the stats. Like I said, DeBarge just blew me away. He's a baseball player on top of having tools in every category. So I mean, those are the guys you're looking for.
He's Cajun through and through. You should have seen him in high school. That dude just knew how to win. Let me ask you again, this or that. We're going to keep doing these this or that. Seaver King, Kyle DeBarge. How far apart?
Man, I mean, on our board, 7 picks, but for me, again, if there's upside with King, right? If it all hits, he's got a little bit louder tools. He can play multiple positions. Now, I've seen Seaver King in center. I've seen him at third. I saw him a little bit shortstop when the sophomore went down, Merrick, Houston, when he went down. So I only saw DeBarge for 3 games at the Sun Belt tournament at shortstop, plus what I saw last summer in the Cape. But it's a close battle. It's better present package in DeBarge, more toolsy, a little more upside with King. But that's a very, very fair comparison.
So hey, sure, let me jump in here. I like the this or that, and I like to think of it as how do we get this and that. So if you had your board set up, and Seif, jump in here. If you had your board set up, and let's say you decided that you had King in the middle of the first round somewhere, and you had DeBarge a little bit further back for whatever reason, and you were comparing King to Brody Brecht, and you're having your conversations, and you're like, do we take Brecht and his upside, or do we take King? A very fair assessment would be, I'll tell you what, guys, I think that DeBarge is going to be there for us in the comp round or early second round. So why don't we take Brecht and get a different version of King in the second round? That's a very fair conversation that happens all the time. That way you get this and that. It's not King, but it's a very close second in DeBarge in the second round. So decisions are made that way as well.
Well, how important then is it, DJ, to have a full scope plan of this draft? When you sit down, we've analyzed, I think it's probably easiest for our audience, everybody, the NFL draft. It's a great wide receiver draft. There are 10 first-round grades, whatever you hey, we're picking. There's only 2 of those wide receivers off the board. We're picking at 18. We're going to get one of those in the second round.
That's right.
So we need to get a left tackle. Is that something you're thinking? And we're going to go to catchers after this. The D-backs will have 4 picks. If both catchers are sitting there, you don't take one of those guys with your first pick. Grab something else and get the next one.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about this in a previous episode. the best organizations can see the draft board, and the scouting director can have him. He can stand there with his assistant or his national cross checker, and they can quality control that board in a way that allows you to have that conversation. And make no mistake, that's a much harder to do than it seems. And that's why you asked me the question when we spoke earlier in the week about setting up a draft board. The mechanics of setting up your board are very, very important because it allows you to have that conversation and you'd be able to see it. And if you can't see the forest for the trees, it's very hard to have that conversation. If us three were standing up at a draft board. So it starts with the way the board is set up. And then it's us three standing there looking at the board, having this conversation, and somebody here picking out and saying, hey, we have DeBarge at 32, or we have DeBarge at 28. He looks very, very similar to King, who we have at 15 or wherever it is. So very, very important, Shooter. That's how you maximize a draft. That's, Dave, you talked about a portfolio. You want your portfolio. I understand the first round pick is very important. But when you're done and you walk away from this thing after day 3 and you look up, especially at your first 4 or 5 picks, you want to be able to look up there and go, wow, look at that package of players we got. And it's not just take the next best player. There's a lot of strategy that comes into that to allow that to happen.
Well, even more strategy, and Seifert, I'm going to keep moving with the position players, right? The college position players, there's a lot of talent. We have not talked about the postseason darling Vance Honeycutt, UNC. Tommy Tanks, have not talked about Tommy White yet. We'll toss in a guy who you probably have been the highest on for forever. I know Ian Smith did a great job for us in Georgia. He was high on the super soft sign. Dylan Dreiling, who had a great postseason, had a great year for Tennessee. So kind of those 3 guys, is there a chance, or I shouldn't say a chance. 1, is there a chance Dreiling goes in the first round? 2, how far can Vance Honeycutt and Tommy White fall? Because I feel like they could go from anywhere from 10-ish all the way to 30. Is that fair to say?
I don't think there's a chance Honeycutt goes 10. I think he's closer to 30. I think that's probably, man, he's such a good defender. You're going to have something there, but when you're swinging and missing as much as he has, there's just nobody who's done it. Nobody who's swung and missed that much that's become an average major league player. And again, there's probably been nobody as good defensively as Honeycutt in center field, but you got to focus on the bat, because if you miss on the bat, you miss on the player. And then Tommy White, I just think he's just fallen a little bit. I know he's a huge college performer, but 90% going to be a first baseman. So now he's at first base. What do you really have? You have a really good college performer, a really good baseball player, but is he going to be your 4-hole hitter with 40 home runs, on a playoff team? Is he that type of guy? And I just think the industry doesn't feel that way. But Tommy White is an outstanding college baseball player too. But I don't think he goes anywhere close to 10. I think he's more around 25 or 30, exactly where Honeycutt will likely go.
Well, Saif, let me stop you there because I want to ask DJ a question about those 2 guys in particular. Right? If you went back to last year, season ends, way too early mock drafts. Tommy White's probably in the top 10. Vance Honeycutt fits a mold. How helpful is it for those 2 guys? 1, they went to premier programs, right? Those are name brand schools. They played well in the postseason. They've been on TV. Can you kind of grab them early in the draft to appease front office people and ownership because there's a name, and get guys later on? Well, now I can work with this. Then I could even go to say, hey, at 15, we're going to take you Tommy White. Mm-hmm. You're not going to go until 25. So we're going to try to get 800K here so that we can get somebody later. Is that something you'd even consider?
I would not consider. I'm still taking the player that I want to take, that the organization feels like is the best fit. Okay. I wouldn't play that game with ownership and the ownership groups don't get involved that much where you feel like you have to appease them in the first round. They just want you to take the best player. You mentioned something a second ago that I thought was interesting, and the way I heard it was players moving on the board, Honeycutt. And I was thinking where a player starts is very, very important in the beginning of the year because there's a perception. And what happens is if you're a Honeycutt or you're a Tommy White and you're projected to go really, really high, and we're sitting here in February or January, and you go out and have a good year, there's automatically a floor built in. So when that player, for whatever reason, falls down the board, there's a stopping point. Conversely, Dreiling's tough. I'm going to go on a limb and say no, he won't go in the first round.
Okay.
Because he wasn't anywhere to be seen. I'm not saying that this is fair. And I'm just like Seif. I'm a big, big Dreiling fan. I really like Dreiling. But where did he start the year? Do you guys know? I don't, not for us, but for the industry. Did he start? I don't know.
I bet some people didn't know he was draft eligible.
There you go. So when you start that low, conversely to a Tommy White or a Vance Honeycutt, now there's this artificial ceiling that gets built in that the player runs into. I am not saying that's fair. I'm just saying it's a real dynamic that happens. So when you look at Dreiling, you can be a little bit more comfortable. Now, probably won't go in the third. This to me looks like a screaming deal in the second round bat. Somebody takes Amick in the first round, or somebody takes Tommy White in the first round, and another team walks away with Dreiling at 48. And they go, we got the guy.
Yeah.
Really good bang for your buck.
Let's compare it to last year's Seif. So Dylan Dreiling, I think we all really like what he's about. Former Super 60 guy, Kansas prep product, which to go off to the SEC and do what he did without having those reps, sensational for him. Sterling Thompson, Florida. How similar are Dreiling and Sterling Thompson? Because kind of left-handed bats, the bat's going to carry. And then it felt to me like last year. Oh, was it last year? He's going to go more supplemental because this kind of popped up a little bit later. So compare those two for me.
No, I think your comparison is right on. Very similar guys, both sophomore eligible. The word I have heard, and it's true every year, is you're going to have to overpay Dreiling. So he may go 10 spots ahead, 15 spots ahead of where maybe teams have him evaluated. But looking at our list, I mean, we have him right there. We have him 23rd in the college class. Last ranking that we had May 1st before Dreiling went off, we had him in the same spot. So we've always liked a bat. We've always liked a player, before he went 13 for 24 with 11 RBI at the World Series, right? Won a national title. So he's not the best defender. He's got a fringy average arm, fringy average defender, fringy average, maybe average speed underway. But the guy hits and he's got thunder in his forearms. I mean, he's not the biggest guy, but the ball jumps. The only time I saw him bad this year was watching those guys on TV for about a 3-week period. There was too much loft in his swing. He was just swinging uphill. He was too much under it. But then in the postseason and obviously at the World Series, he flattened it out and absolutely raked. And that's just the type of bat I think you're getting. So there's enough defense. There's enough everything else there that even though it's a corner outfield and it's left field, he profiles to a spot and he's going to hit. I think he's a five-hole hitter in the big leagues, and that's why we have him above some of the other guys, that have maybe a more proven track record, like a Tommy White and that type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Shooter, Seif, you guys talked about DeBarge versus King. I hear us talk about Dreiling, and I think Dreiling versus Tibbs. Is this the second round version of James Tibbs? Is DeBarge the second round version of Seaver King? This is where teams get really, really excited, where they feel like they're getting great bang for their buck.
And I think in this draft, there is so much depth in that second and third round. We'll talk about the high school class in the future, but Seif, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, and to DJ's point, right? Like James Tibbs was always a really good hitter, but now he has 3 years at Florida State. Dreiling only has 2. So the reason you overpay Dreiling is because his age is going to point to Tibbs and said, hey, after one more year of this same production, now he's a James Tibbs top half of the first round guy, right? Just it's the same thing. Tibbs's tools really didn't get better, and Dreiling's probably won't either. Dreiling's a little bit better athlete than Tibbs, but Tibbs just had another year of another really good year. Now he did show some improvement, and Dreiling should too, but that's why Dreiling will be overdrafted by 10 to 15 spots, just because he's going to play the leverage game that he should as a sophomore eligible.
And Seif, I'm going to ask you about your tongue on this one, because we'll probably do it on another show. But at some point, I did think that the NIL package may come into play for a guy like that who might envision himself as a top 10 pick next year. I will, though, both of you guys are huge fans of this. And DJ, I know you dove into some of the metrics with it. But kid Ryan Waldschmidt from Kentucky, what do we got on this kid? Because I feel like he could be a buzzy name over the next 2 weeks that people are just yelling about. Break this guy down.
DJ, me or DJ? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, break him down. And then DJ's
break him down. Huge fan when he's at college at Charleston. I don't know how I ran into his freshman year, but I did, and I actually forget. It was just one of those days where you're like at 4 different ballparks. It's early in the year, and you're kind of just trying to catch games. But But then saw him then he transferred to Kentucky, saw him that fall. Then he had knee surgery. So he came out of the gates this spring really slow. He just DH'd, I think, the first 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually just lucked into it. I saw Kennesaw State when they went to Kentucky. I think it was in week 4. It was Waldschmidt's first time back in the field. He had DH'd again the first 3 weekends, but he wasn't moving too good. So he's a below average runner down the line. It was wet the entire weekend, so I think he was a little tentative again, coming back off the knee injury, so kind of feeling things out. He threw terrible, not only arm strength wise, but he launched one 40 feet up the line from left field. It wasn't close. We kind of leave there I see the explosive bat speed. I know what I've seen in the past, but leaving there, you couldn't put him in the first or second round. You couldn't even put him in day 1 or even the top 3 rounds, really. Talking to other scouts in the area that were there, they're kind of what do you do with this guy? Because they had seen in the past too. But he had a remarkable year. One of the top 3 hitters in SEC-only games with Moore and Condon. Again, there's 70 grade bat speed there. There's a guy who used to play center field his freshman year who is only in left field because he's getting through the injury. I think he could return to center field on a part-time role and then obviously play the rest of it in left field. Doesn't have the arm for right field, but man, he's got bat to ball. He's got explosive power. He didn't put up big home run total, but I think it's 20's in there at the pro level, no problem. But yeah, another really talented guy, and I'm just behind Dreiling, who I guess I just have more, just a little more comfort with. I guess.
He's your guy.
So hey, Seif, when I hear you guys talk about this, and I plowed into this Waldschmidt stuff in our 643 charts and all that. His numbers are off the charts compared to everybody else. Is he going to run into the same thing that a DeBarge or a Dreiling runs into, where he didn't start high enough early in the year, so he bumps into a little bit of a ceiling? Or do you think a team is just going to come rushing in going, I don't care where he started, his numbers are just so good, we're taking him in 15. We think he's better than Tibbs. We think will a team do that, you think?
I think it depends on the club. I really think, though, that the club that started with this guy higher is probably going to be the guy that takes him, because you know it is. You don't, in your area scouts, I was an area scout and I was a cross checker. I never sat in your chair. That's the big chair. I never sat there, never wanted to sit there. But you know how to read your area scouts, right? Some are just up and down, up and down, up and down. There's no trust in that guy. But I think the area scout, the good area scout who had this guy, 5th through 7th round early, because a lot of guys didn't even if you would have seen him against Kennesaw State or whatever, you'd be again, you'd walk away scratching your head. This isn't really a guy. Cause like I said, he didn't throw, he didn't run, he didn't field. He showed the bat speed, but I don't count hits, but it wasn't like he went 8 for 12 in the series. Right. Yeah. So you walk away from that series kind of going what is this guy? But anyway, back to my point is that the club that started with him, probably the highest or in the highest regard, that club is a cleaner track record to taking him higher. That's just my opinion.
I've heard this a couple times, and I want to make this, just talk about this for 2 seconds. The value in the summer scouting, the value in being diligent in the fall, and the value in a well-prepared November, December draft board, how it can really help a player and how it ultimately can help the team. If the team does the good job early on and a lot of times teams don't want to do this. They just don't. Scouts don't want to do it. It's been a long year, long spring. It's been a long summer. So we're just going to kind of get them up there on the board and we'll deal with it in the spring. You might be doing yourself a disservice because of this dynamic that we're talking about, and your team's not in position to take Waldschmidt. And most directors, to your point, if it starts too low and scouts don't want to look like they made a mistake early, the player can slip through the cracks. So the diligence with which you execute summer and fall and your initial draft board becomes really, really important for this kind of player.
Yeah, I mean, we always had, it was kind of a split camp like everything, right? Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody would do it this way or that way. But some guys really like the follow reports. I was one of those. Hey, I don't mind turning in 100 summer follows. They're just short reports, 2 or 3 cents, and not a full report. So it's not really a lot of time, at least the way we did it. I didn't mind it. Some guys did. On the flip side, though, I was better. I could have been better. This is not about me. I guess I'm just valuing myself here. But I was really good about getting the initial follow report on, from the guy 2 years before he was draft eligible or 1 year or whatever. But then I would always fall into the trap of thinking, okay, the last 2 times I saw him or the last 3 times I saw him, that's what I'd base most of my evaluation on. And I would forget my first 2 or 3, which are really important as well, right? So, but to your point, though, where I'm going with this, it's a blend. It's an organizational blend of every report from start to finish. So on Waldschmidt, I think it should follow that same path, right? Like if you had an area guy who liked him, and now he blew up late in the season or the second half of the season in front of your cross-checker, in front of your scouting director, things like that.
Yeah, here I go again. Volume and diversity of looks.
There you go. See, you say it more simple. I use 5 sentences.
It's so important. You know it, Seif. You've scouted. It's so important to know these players because it's very hard to separate them at the finish line where you're not. It's not like and dislike. It's separating very good players,
right?
And they all look good right now. You think they're all going to go out and be good, but you have to be able to pick the right one. You have to be able to pick the right one.
So let's shift over because we haven't talked much about the pitching yet. Right, Seif? It's still position very heavy. DJ's punting all these pitchers. You have a great article on the site right now, prepbaseball.com, prepbaseballreport.com, 90th percentile pitchers. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you are researching with this, what it says, and who you found?
Well, this time of year, this actually started maybe a month ago or so. Really getting into 643 data. I got DJ hooked on it now too, so that's a win right there. But we're just diving in there, and I've always been curious. Like when I was the area scout, when I was a cross checker, we'd get this data list from our data department, right? And at first, we had this just a very poor policy that you had to see all 37 guys on the list or whatever. Some areas had more guys in there, but they were just data guys that the front office made you see. And some guys stunk. They had no tools, but they just had great numbers because they're in D3 or JUCO in Kansas where the wind never stops blowing, things like that. So you'd spin your wheels seeing half this list and half one. But that did spin my wheels like, okay, now I'm doing this. I've seen all the players. I've seen all the prospects. I want to do a data dive to see the guys I've missed or to reinforce what I have seen. So in this case, I dove in. I asked 643 to run me a query. Tell me who are the guys that have at least 3 pitches that are in the 90th percentile of college baseball, of Division I college baseball.
Okay.
Who are they? So about 4 weeks ago, there were 9. And I forgot a few of the names, but I had them run it about a week and a half ago, came up with 6 names. And the first 3 names on the list, and again, it doesn't matter the pitches, it's just that they have 3 pitches that are 90th percentile. So Chase Burns, obviously, well, not obviously, but he came out as one of 3. He has a whiff rate on his slider of over 62%, on his curve over 60%, on his fastball over 35%. And those are all like 98th or 99th percentile.
Yeah.
He also has a really good changeup. I don't think he just threw enough. It's a 100-pitch qualifier or something like that. He just didn't throw enough changeups to qualify, but he would have had a 4th pitch that was stupid good. But anyway, slam dunk first rounder, no surprise there, right? Next on the list was Trey Yesavage. We talked about him before. 58.2% on his slider, 57% on his change, 60% on his cutter. Right. And sometimes when you're tagging pitches, I'm sure slider, cutter, similar. This gets tagged here. This gets tagged here, even though it was a slider. They tagged as cutter. But there was still plenty of each. And I know he throws those pitches. So, again, first rounder, no need to go on. Right. Next, and this was kind of surprising. I saw him in a 2-inning relief stint at Globe Life in week 2. And he was, I think it was his first outing of the spring, but Carson Benji. Right. 65% whiff rate on his curve, 64 on his slider, 56 on his changeup. Now, as a fastball, his fastball doesn't have a ton of life, but it's up to 96, and he's got just kind of a pedestrian fastball whiff rate. But 3 off-speed pitches, over 55, 56%, phenomenal. So then I just, kept digging, keep going down the list or whatever, and then 2 of the other 3 names that popped up I'm really familiar with. Zach Davidson, saw him for 2 years at Lincoln Trail Junior College, really good. And I forget where he went. I think he went to Elon maybe for a year, transferred back to Indiana State, put together a phenomenal senior season at Indiana State. 56% whiff rate curve, 54 slider, 29 on his fastball. And he's a lefty. He's up to 92. I think he averaged over 90 miles per hour in his fastball this year. Really good numbers. Now, he's a senior, probably a likely day 3 draft pick, but he's left-handed. One thing I learned my first year from a good cross-checker told me you can never go wrong in picking left-handed senior pitchers. And I did. I had a lot of success with them. Not all of them made the big leagues, but they all made AA, and they were seniors and $1,000 signs. So Zach Davidson, whoever gets this guy, you're looking, I don't know if you're looking at a big leaguer here, but you're looking like a guy who's going to have success. And then the last name on the list, Tyler Hampu. He's a senior right-handed pitcher from Austin P.
Okay.
I just happened to run into him. I don't know if it was fall or spring. It was spring. It was a spring summertime. I was just down at Western Kentucky kind of tooling that whole area. And I saw him throw. Now, he has control problems that he's got to get over. He walked 30 in 29 innings. Okay, so more than a walk an inning. But he also struck out 57 in 29 innings. So over 2 strikeouts an inning. So his whiff rate, 63% on a slider, and it is dirty. Changeup, 51%. Fastball, 28%. He's up to 96. I saw him up to 96 or 97 that day. He averaged 94 miles per hour this year. So I know there's command, control issues there. But he's a guy for me that I would definitely get on day 3 too. So if I was an area guy, he's a guy to be picking for, because there's guys that throw 96, but there's not guys that have 2 other secondaries that get whiffed so often. So long-winded there, but those are my nasty boys right there.
You know what, Dave? When I listen to you talk about this stuff, I get really inspired, because you can be a very dangerous scout in a lot of different ways. A scout that just wants to go to the yard, he can be okay, and a scout that just wants to plow into the stuff. But if you have a creative mind and you're hungry to find players and you want to go to the yard, the combination of those 2 things can be really, really scary and deadly, and you'd be a great scout. So I love hearing that stuff. Those are the kind of things that we preached hard, different ways to source players outside of and it starts with passion. It starts with wanting to find good players. It starts with wanting to find undervalued players, and there's some really good scouts out there like yourself that do those things. And then there's some scouts that I wish would take more time to do that, because we have the resources. Teams have the resources. So it's great job.
Along with being the mid-major champion of the world, Dr. Seif just craves day 2 value. Nothing he loves more than to dominate day 2. So shout out to you for doing that, Seif, there. Go ahead.
I love day 3 too.
Oh, and day 3.
Maybe not listening to 2 rounds in one day, but I love getting players on day 3.
He's actually championing going back to the 50-round draft just so he can get some more hidden gems.
Hey, shooter! I'm going to interrupt you here, because now you're talking day 2. Now you're talking my speed as well. Seif, I don't know who that cross-checker was that told you to take left-handers, but I absolutely love it. I had an ex-general manager tell me that's been in multiple roles in baseball. He said, if you're getting to the 10th, 11th, 12th round and you haven't taken a college left-hander yet, you better reach up on the board and take the next best one. And I remember I executed that. Nobody knows why I did it. I just never forgot what that scout told me. And in my first year as a scouting director in 19, we hadn't taken left-handed pitching yet. Day 3, we're prepping our day 3 board. I went up there. I can't remember the exact order. Zach King from Vandy, Easton Lucas from Pepperdine, and Andrew Nardi from Arizona. Every single one of those guys, I just took them in order because of what you just said. And 2 out of those 3 pitched in the big leagues. So
let's stay on this, because again, I'm going to keep coming back, Seif. We talk about it all the time, this or that, this guy, this grouping. And I feel like that, I guess, almost 3rd tier of pitching where the grouping gets bigger, right? We got 20, 25 arms here in the group. To me, that's where scouting departments differ the most. Like, oh, I like this guy. That guy stinks. Or I don't like that guy. There's a lot more, hey, these guys are back-to-back. I like this guy more. I'm looking at our board right now, like Chris Cortez, the Stuff Plus. Like, I'm all about it. Gage Jump, not as hot on it, but Gage jumps ahead on our board, which it's natural. Like, that's
left over right. Left over right, shooter. Left over right.
Yeah, but anyway, like, I'm telling you what I like, and that's where he's at for me. What I want to talk more about are some of the guys who are similar. So I'm talking like a Drew Beam type. What's the kid's name from Vanderbilt? Cunningham. Mm-hmm. The separation in these guys, when you're going into it, now they're all on the board. We know we want to take one of them. What are you looking at? Is that where you're pinning guys? What will you sign for? Can we get you for slot? Can we get you for under slot? Where are you? We're going to take this guy. What are things you're saying there? DJ in the second, third, fourth round, where you have a bigger grouping of guys that you can choose between. You kind of the control more goes to the team versus those top 5 picks where it's like, no, this is what I've got. I'm defining my value. Hey, these guys are more in a grouping.
I'll jump in here, Seif, really quick. Generally speaking, historically, college pitching is a very it's a tough group to pick from in the second and the third round. It really is, because they're all really good, but the outcomes for college pitching in the second and third round, specifically in the second round, it tends to underperform historically for a multitude of reasons. So to your question, Shooter, when you want to dive into this college bucket and you're talking about a Drew Beam, or you're talking about Cunningham from Vandy, and there's some others. Who's the other one?
Aiden May from Oregon State.
Sure. You really want to make sure that you know what attributes, what characteristics you're looking for that player to potentially outperform what historically is not a great group to shop in. You probably should be jumping into this like toolsy position player bucket, because the players, just like I'm not a big advocate of like the college shortstop generally in like the second or third round, if it's more defense than hitting, because that player can be sourced later on. Yeah. So this college group, you really want to make sure that there's some characteristics in there, some TrackMan stuff, some miss stuff. Let's keep it simple. Which player really makes college hitters look bad? I can tell you this. You were trumpeting this guy's cause a while ago, Seif, when I asked you about it, and Shooter, you just brought him up. Cortez, he makes college hitters look bad. So maybe a very simple way to look at it, which of these players, or separate them, who makes hitters look bad and which has stuff that's going to be sustainable into professional baseball.
Hey, DJ, can I press you on the Cortez? Like, not to do too much on Cortez. Cortez, to me, he's going to have some tough weeks. Like, he's going to go into pro ball and he is going to walk and look bad. But in the end of the day, he's going to be 99 to 102 with about 80 horizontal movement versus Aiden May, who's going to come out. He's going to pound the zone. He's going to give you 5 innings. He's going to float right to AA because he throws so many strikes and he has a chance to get those swings and misses. How important is it, the culture within your department and your cross checkers, who you trust, where, hey, we got to get this guy because this stuff plus we can do this, this, and this player development. I mean, we've done so much with it, but like that's kind of where you're balancing those two guys.
Yeah, I think so. Cortez is an interesting one because we've had that starter reliever conversation. But more, you want to try to get the guys with the stuff up there. Yeah. Really, especially when you're talking about multiple pitches. This isn't just a guy that throws hard. He's got a whole bunch of different weapons and stuff like that. So.
Well, what about, shoot, this is really going in depth here, Seif, but like if you've had a couple bad drafts or tough drafts, there's a lot of heat, there's movement going on in a department. Hey, I know Aiden May is going to get to AA. We are going to be able to craft this guy into, I don't know, we're a big market. We're LA, we're Chicago, Houston, New York. We can make this guy look better than he is potentially. Hey, we're going to get this. It's a little bit safer versus, I mean, if Chris Cortez, I don't know, throws on a fighting necklace and can throw 90% strikes all of a sudden, he just explodes to the roof. But that's a huge risk compared to, those starter type. Drew Beam's going to come in and pump the zone. There's stuff that they do. Is that something that you have to think within your department? The fact that, hey, if Chris Cortez goes out and walks 6 in his first outing in the backfield, I'm going to look like crap.
Again, I just go back to what I said half hour ago. So I think it's your portfolio. And DJ said, you want to look back at your top 4 or 5 picks and go, wham. I think it needs to be balanced, but like there needs to be upside there, but there also needs to be present skills. I don't think you can take the approach of like the 2011 Tampa Bay, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but I do those draft reviews every year. I kind of have a good memory of
Tell us about
past drafts. So in 2011, Tampa Bay, they had 9-10 picks of the top 60, right? And they went high school heavy, and now they did get Blake Snell out of it, but they got nothing else. Snell is the only guy out of the 10 guys, 11 guys that they took in the top 60 or 75 picks that they got. They just went chips all in on the high ceiling type guys. And they did take Mikey Maytuk from Louisiana State with their second pick. So that's obviously a lower ceiling guy, but didn't even hit on him. But the rest was high school and junior college, high upside. So back to today with what you're talking. I just think if you've taken some performers, guys are gonna do well, they've already done well, or a prep bat, that's a polished prep bat, then roll the dice with Chris Cortez with your maybe even second pick, or most likely third pick if you're a team with multiple picks there. I'm not saying if you only have one pick each. If you only have one pick each round, you're probably, if you think you're going to get Cortez in the third, you're not going to get Cortez because he's going to go second. So, but to your point, there's upside there. Will he throw enough strikes, things like that? And then Aiden May for me he's Lance McCullers. I mean, he literally threw his slider 63% of the time this past year in college. So he'll buzz the double A just with that breaking ball. But he can also throw 96, 97 on the high end and pitch at 2 and 3. And it's not the greatest of life fastball, but he throws strikes, like you said earlier. So it is kind of two different guys, but I just think it's who you pick before and who you plan to pick after, that type of stuff.
So with regards to those guys, so Drew Beam, Bryce Cunningham, Aiden May, are you saying more third round for them? Where do you think they go?
I think they all go late too. I mean, Cortez may go a little just because of the stuff, and he has had a really good year. He's shown improvement. Mm-hmm. I think Aiden May goes in the top 50, 55 picks. I think Beam is more of a late 2, early 3 type of guy.
So, DJ, let me press it over to you because you just talked about those college guys in the second round. Would you feel better getting those arms in the third round and potentially trying to?
I would personally, having not gone out and seen them. These sound like really good third and fourth round type arms. And I think when people talk about the draft, not us, when people talk about the draft being a little light or writing articles that it's not a good draft, you run into not a lot of middle of the field high school players. And then when you put on top of it, the second group of college pitching isn't as deep as it is sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's why people say, but when you look at 1 through 30 and you see all those college hitters and some of the high school hitters that we'll talk about later on, the beginning part of the draft is really good. So I might wait a little bit on some of these college arms and just take whichever one's left and probably stay with the bats. That would be my general sense.
Saif, let me ask you about a few others. I'm going to shift the topic, and this has been outstanding. Thanks for coming on here. I'm already looking forward to Sunday and draft day and all the content we'll have between the rounds and between the stoppages. What about guys who performed in the past? And we just talked about the length of the scouting and the uniqueness of those looks, but a guy like Sirota, who did not have a great spring. Guys were talking about him as a first rounder. Austin Overn, who had a big freshman year. He's a draft eligible soft, didn't have the standout breakout, hey, I'm going to be a first rounder draft soft like a Dylan Dreiling. Looking even Anthony Silva from TCU, another draft soft, shortstop, not quite the same breakout season he had as a freshman. How are we evaluating those guys where in the draft room, at least to me, if we have good interviews with them, we trust this kid's process, we like what he's about, we might steal this guy in the third or fourth round. Is that something that you'd be thinking? DJ, I'll go to you first with those guys.
I love this. I love this question. So I love this topic. We call it what I've called it in the past, and we did this in our draft room, the Reclamation Project. We would do that all the time. Here's a great example. Clausen from Minnesota last year. How about our boy Griff McGarry from your Virginia guy?
This is all
Griff McGarry, Virginia. Players that at one point we really, really liked, and we had the information, the data, and the scouting reports to support it, and then all of a sudden the player falls off. We would have a very specific list that's what we would call it, the Reclamation Project. We liked them, and now what do we do with them? Andrew Nardi was like that. We had Group 5 reports on Andrew Nardi when he was in junior college. Our cross-checker did a fantastic job. He was up and down when he was at Arizona. We were more than happy to take him later down the board because he had the talent. So I think it starts with making a conscious decision and making a conscious effort that these players exist, and make sure you cluster them together and circle the ones after you go through it, which ones you think. And a lot of it is what you said. Was there a Was there an injury that the player was trying to overcome? Did something happen in the middle of the year? Is there something in the background? How about his pitching coach? Maybe he didn't get along with his pitching coach. There could be a lot of different things that put him in that reclamation bucket, but there's a lot of value to be had there.
How many teams do that? Because Seif, DJ just touched on some trigger words for you. Griff McGarry, all these guys that you are locked in. Andrew Abbott was one of your favorite guys, Seif. How many teams are actually doing that? Have their area guys dive in that deep to where like, hey, this didn't fit out. He's not doing this and this. Or, to me as a pitching guy, like the pitch selection for a lot of schools is just crushes guys. And then it's just simple as, hey, you should throw this pitch more. How many teams are doing that and diving in that deep, do you think?
I think it just depends on your area guy. I don't think it's a team thing, right? Like anything in life, it's the self-motivation, right? It's going to take you, it's going to take you places or not take you places. But as an area scout, just like in any walk of life, there's just a variety of motivation, right? Some guys are just doing the job. Some guys go above and beyond. Again, just like any walk of life. And I think the ones that go above and beyond, they dig on every single player, want to get this information, some of the things you brought up, and like we'll meet with a guy multiple times, and it all goes back to how many times they see them play, the most comfort, so they get in the draft room. And then the other part is DJs know, like I was a good presenter. Like I used video, I had passion for this guy. I really presented well when I had a scouting director who listened, right? That's the difference maker too. But it's really more an organizational thing. But beyond that, it's who the organization hires and how well they do their job. So I'm not bashing scouts by any means because they all do a great job. But yeah, it's just the individual area scout. So I don't really know. I answered your question long-winded again, but there's really not one true answer to your question. It's just motivation by the guy doing the digging.
Hey, Seif, let me piggyback off that. I want to share a really quick story about finding value in the draft and some of the exercises that are done. There's a university, a major university, when they have pitchers that are very, very talented and they're not performing really well, we were always in play because they always go out and outperform their draft position. So teams are doing a lot of research on those kind of things. So if I need to rephrase this, there are universities that have very talented players that outperform their draft position because they weren't getting the instruction to maximize their potential. Mm-hmm. And teams are very aware of that. Just like you're going to do a reclamation project, you're going to know the outcomes for these colleges. It's really important to know what these kids are getting, what these pitchers are getting at their university. Super important.
Seif, because we want to wrap up here in a second, but I have a couple more questions with you. And I think one, do you have a collection of 2 or 3 guys who's in the Griff McGarry group for you where, hey, I think I really like this guy. He's probably going to fall down. He's got a chance to be a big time guy. If not Griff McGarry, the Andrew Abbotts, those guys who, hey, these are really good players. Maybe is it Sam Antonucci, your guy there at Coastal Carolina? Who are some names for you that are like day 2, there's value here. They will go below where I think they should.
Yeah, I think you hit on one, Antonucci. I just have so much experience with him, right? I'm comfortable and I've seen him enough. I'm comfortable knowing what he is. And I think Sam Antonucci, we have him on 67 on the college board, played third base at Coastal. I think he's going to be a shortstop in Pro Bowl because I've seen it. I saw it for 2 years in junior college. He can hit. He has bat to ball. He has speed. Now he wasn't running as well as I saw him last year, so I'm not sure if something was wrong because he's more of a 45-ish runner now than when I saw Coastal at the Sun Belt tournament. But he's definitely put together a solid year in his first year in 4-year Division I baseball. An arm I really like, and again, it's all comfort. It's how many times I see him. LP Langevin, or I guess it's Langevin, or they changed how he moved to Louisiana he's Canadian, went to Wabash Valley Junior College for 2 years, so they pronounced his last name one way. Now he's at Louisiana, they pronounce it a different way from when I was told at the Sun Belt tournament. And you know how bad I am with last names anyway, so LP. Right-hand pitcher, he has the liveliest fastball. If I go back to the 90th percentile, the nasty boys, he actually had the highest whiff rate of any fastball in the country. So really like him, under the radar gun. He did not throw well at the Sun Belt tournament, but it doesn't matter. I saw him enough in junior college to know what I'm getting there. And, man, you put me on the spot. Trying to flip through the list here real quick, or maybe somebody even a little bit lower than
Seif, while you're thinking about it, I'll give you mine. Like Jared Thomas is a guy that I loved in high school. He's at Texas. DJ, you and I have discussed him.
Yeah, like Jared Thomas.
I'm curious as the difference between he and Dreiling. If some guys are really hard in there. Now, Dreiling was on TV every week. The Longhorn Network, I don't have it. And I just don't get me going on that whole thing. But he's a guy that I'm curious to see what happens with him. Not quite as much power as Dreiling, but maybe a better defender, athlete. And then even Jalen Flores, his teammate, another draft-eligible soph. What a year to be an A&M or UT guy, where the NIL situation, which we are going to have to do a full show on and really dive into that stuff, because that may come into to being a factor for these draft softs. The fact that these conglomerates and NIL departments might be able to make up that difference. But those are two guys that I'm circling, but especially Jared Thomas. Sorry.
No, thanks for I found a guy, I went down the list a little bit. Marcus Morgan, for me, the right-hand pitcher, Iowa, started the year was pretty solid. I mean, everybody's like, oh, yeah, second round. He just did not have a good year at all. Mm-hmm. The entire Iowa staff. Brody Breck ended up having a pretty solid year, solidified his first round, but he didn't really improve much, like significantly. But Marcus Morgan, for me, super good athlete, super good arm, loose as can be, good breaking ball. He has just never thrown strikes. He walked 53 and 54 innings this year, 51 and 65 last year. But if I'm picking fifth, sixth round, I'm looking at my board, and I've had a pretty conservative draft, and it's a sixth round, I'd probably give Marcus a call and ask him if he'd sign for somewhere below the slot and take a flyer on. But it's a 96 mile per hour arm with a really good breaking ball. He's a 70 athlete. You can't go really wrong throwing $150,000, $200,000 guy, to this guy. But it depends how your board falls. But this is a guy I would definitely earmark on my board as somebody to highlight to get.
Sounds like a key reclamation project candidate right there.
Yes.
Another Big Ten guy, George Clausen last year. Same idea.
Yep.
And he's out. The Phillies did McGarry. The Phillies did Clausen. Both have gone out and done well for them. Big stuff. It's
fascinating the Phillies may have to do Cortez then too, because those are all guys that were not strike throwers, Griff McGarry, Clausen, and now all of a sudden they're jumping up and they have a chance to do some stuff. DJ, do you have anything else for Seif before I let him go? I know we've been stealing his time here. He's still just absolutely nerding out with the 643 guys, getting all his data,
right.
Just scanning everything he can to find out what little minute details we can have in this draft board. What do you have for Seif, DJ?
No, I'm good. You touched on Jared Kelly. I was interested in the positional stuff with Jared Kelly. I started thinking a lot about Melton a couple years ago. That's gone out and done a pretty good job for, I think Astros took Jacob Melton from Oregon State. And I'm looking at Kelly. Of course, there's some position stuff, but he stole 18, 19, 20 bags this year. Sounds like it's an athlete. Did he just get stuck behind a good center fielder? Did they just run Will Gasparino out there all year, or can he not play center field, or what's the deal there?
Yes, because I know he played some center. I think a lot came down to he had to fill voids, right? First base, he kind of went wherever because of the other. They had so many fresh. That's the other thing with him. And I'm curious. I'm sure scouting departments, if anybody's listening to this, they're like, "Oh yeah, we are attacking Jared Thomas right now." Dreiling had a lot of protection around him. No. How many first rounders are in that lineup? How many top 50 picks versus Texas, where a lot of young bats in here. We have a lot of guys we can pitch to. He's going to see different kind of pitching. So those are just some things that I think about. Hey, how far apart are these two guys? What can we save here? How can we find some hidden value in this guy versus that guy? And ultimately, DJ, in the next show, how many high school arms can we collect late?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Seif, really appreciate you coming on here. Please feel free, check out prepbaseball.com. The draft board will be up there. College list, as always, we've talked about the splitting up position players, pitchers from each side of high school, college, because That's how it's done. It is not 1 through 500. That makes no sense. We just talked about how big these groupings can get and just how many guys from 11 at James Tibbs through 25 at Dylan Dreiling, just how far apart are those 14 spots. But awesome stuff today, fellas. I'm already looking forward. July 14th, Sunday night, we are going to be on talking post first round, post day one, and just wrapping up, filling all the voids of commercial time to tell you what the actual facts are and what we're thinking in the moment. So looking forward to that. DJ, Seif, can't wait to see you guys again. We'll be talking some more stuff leading up to the draft. But until next time, this has been the War Room. Thanks for being with us.